Hello everyone, thanks for having me here today. It's great to be back in Logan. I'm a community planner, I specialise in community development, and really I work at the intersection of industry, government, community and place. Very much my practice is about a bottom-up approach, so working with the strengths of community to actually create change. And I'm glad to be speaking after Catherine because it is a bottom-up approach. So it's very much grassroots and bringing from community up to meet top-down processes like master planning, like planning itself. The image on the screen here is from work I did out in Logan 13 years ago when I started my business, Plan C. It's at the Woodridge Skate Park. It's an early activation. Obviously there's a guy on a skateboard there with some hula dancers from the local community behind him dancing away. There was music, there was youth information, there was fitness, there were other activities. It was an activation to create a temporary space in the skate park to make young people feel welcome. It was a way of making the space engaging to a range of people, not just white boys on boards. So people from multicultural backgrounds, young women, etc. And it's just a really nice example. I love that project, I really did. We used to get 500 young people turning up to that. And then as a consequence, because it was such a good collector for young people, because they had a great time, they wanted to be part of it, a lot of the community services used to come in and also join in so they could access young people. So today I want to talk about some macro trends in terms of community and placemaking. I want to talk about a project from Tasmania last year in Gleeson, which I think is particularly relevant to Logan Central, which is about a multicultural community space. Quick yarn about Popup Community Infrastructure, some talk about activation, tactical urbanism, micro-mixing and disruption. Some stuff about social impact investment funds, which is coming up currently. It's going to be transformative for the community sector and for the way that infrastructure is delivered, and I'm working on a project in that arena at the moment. And then, because I've got a captive audience, and hopefully I'm not boring you too much, just some practitioner reflection over the last 15 years. And that'll probably take 30 seconds, so please indulge me. Okay, macro trends. Governments are increasingly unable to afford to invest in community services and community infrastructure. Those funds are just shrinking, so we need to look at new ways of doing it. There's less ability to fund programs, and therefore community support structures, individual responsibility and grassroots bottom-up activity becomes even more important, because that's how things happen. It's really interesting, the further out west you go or the more remote a community you work in, the level of volunteering always is much higher in a remote community than it is in a city, because people have to band together to get things done and make things happen. So, everyone's got a cousin or an auntie who lives somewhere remote that's part of 16 different committees, organisations, does this, does that. So that's becoming important again, because if we want services and activities, we've often got to do it ourselves. There's generational change. So millennials are increasingly foregoing space to live close to activity. Housing affordability is a massive issue going forward. So the way that we live and the way that our children and children's children, the space they're able to access and live in is going to be by definition smaller, mainly because of affordability and because of social change. And so therefore cities are going to change as well. There is new models of microeconomic development, micro-mixing, which I'll talk about later as well. Social media is a huge facilitator of local connectivity, action and disruption, and it has negative social consequences as well as positive. So currently at the moment, my only major project in southeast Queensland is in Logan, and I'm pleased and proud to be working on the Flagstone development, which is a new regional city of 50,000 people that's just started developing here in Logan. Social impact investment, which I'll touch on later, is about unleashing billions for social good. So really it's those huge super funds with trillions to invest, and having investment packages where you get a financial return, which might be smaller than, say, investing in coal or non-renewables, but you get a social benefit as a consequence. So that's part of the investment package. First project is about a cultural collaboration, the Gleeson Multicultural Community Spaces Plan. Gleeson is an area, actually I'll flick ahead to it, in the south of Hobart. You probably can't see it, but the Museum of Old and New Art, Mona, is located in Gleeson. It's a little orange dot there on the Derwent River. If anyone's been fortunate enough to go down there, it's an incredible space. It's on the outskirts of Hobart. It is a magnet for people from multicultural backgrounds. It's a destination and arrival point for a lot of new refugees and migrants who come into Hobart. So this project was very much about working with 3 target groups, so emerging and newly arrived migrants, so generally people that have been in the country for less than 2 years who are represented. Their countries of origin are represented in the yellow dots on the world map there. Target group 2, which was children of migrants, young people who are very public by definition and had big needs and demands for space. And the third group were the more established multicultural groups that might have been multi-generational, that might have come here after the Second World War, etc., etc. So, you know, that rich heritage about the Italian or the Greek migrants who came between the wars, who banded together, that set up their own community spaces, had their own community networks, were self-organising. There is that rich legacy. Today, the humanitarian migrants that were coming into Hobart couldn't speak the language, were the victims of trauma and torture. You know, a lot of Afghani Hazara women whose husbands had been killed by the Taliban with teenage children. So the project really was about setting up a space for them to undertake cultural activities, form communities, celebrate, have some privacy and actually engage more fully with the community as well. So one of the first things we did was a calendar which mapped out all the different groups that were there and when their religious festivals were, when they might have a particular peak need for space. So you can kind of see in there, this is the Bhutanese community, Afghan, current Ethiopian communities, their days, religious days or cultural days. In the end, the solution that we came up with was from 5 sources, I suppose. There wasn't a huge amount of funding available. We sort of defined the need. What we came up with was the council provided a hall called Old Mac. There was some funding provided by the federal government. The humanitarian and multicultural sector came together to facilitate the space. The community volunteered and local business got behind it. And we now have this hub in Moona within Glenorchy, which you can see here in the aerial photo of the side, which is central to the central business district. It's a real win for the community. We spoke to the local chamber. They were 100% behind it. They're going, that's great. What an amazing activity generator for weekends where we've got lots of different groups using the space for their own purposes. Creates weekend traffic. We're happy to support. It then actually brings more support to a local food festival, which was Taste of the World. It gives a very public face to that interaction between newly arrived groups in particular and existing residents and businesses. So yeah, there was sort of 5 stakeholders involved: council with the building, federal grants, multicultural groups themselves, state government with operational funding and local businesses. So really it was about active acknowledgement of diversity. To me personally, I think that's one of the biggest strengths with Logan Central, with the vast number of groups that are represented here. Making that as public as possible, in my opinion, will put Logan Central on the map because it is one of its great strengths. They were able to then establish micro-businesses within this hub as well. So a commercial kitchen was put in, so smaller scale catering operations happened. People could buy food there, you know, and the small economy just started to emerge as well. So it's been quite a successful project so far. I'll be interested to see how it goes over time, and especially to check back in with the local business community to see how it's working and if it's mutually beneficial. The next thing I want to talk about is Popup Infrastructure. I'm working on this at the moment. There's a real lag, as all the planners in the room will know, between thresholds in community and being able to provide services, the design, development timeframe, the funding timeframes, etc. So for those that don't know, the way that social infrastructure is normally planned is for every 10,000 people you need a police station, for example. For every 4,000 people you need a community facility. It's always done retrospectively. So you kind of approach or get to that threshold, you apply for funding, you do the design, you build the facility. What we're proposing is you use this whole pop-up infrastructure, whether it's containers or what have you, and you know, you've got a way of bringing infrastructure online a lot faster. It's a lot cheaper. It looks a lot cooler, in my opinion. You know, because of the cost of it, you can make mistakes. You can be experimental. It can be incremental. You can add on, you can take away, you can use it as a testing ground for a more permanent building, but most importantly, you can get the infrastructure happening faster. And so we're working on this project at the moment. It's easily movable. You can bolt other things onto it as well. So here's just some images. Interestingly, the top right-hand corner is from a festival ground, and I cunningly cut off Bacardi Bar and all the other signage that was on there. So, you know, if you can do it for Splendour in the Grass, if you can do it for a major event, and you can bump this stuff in pretty quickly and handle that many people having a great time, why can't we have this more permanently in cities? So I'm pretty fond of it. The next one is just on the right-hand side are two examples, and on the left-hand side is a new commercial space in the valley in Brisbane called X-Cargo, which is really all made out of containers as well, and it's you know, intended as a commercial space. So just a bit of inspiration there. There's been a bit of a global movement in tactical urbanism in the last kind of 5 to 10 years. It's all about change. It's all about local ideas for local challenges. It's short-term and realistic. It's not hugely expensive. It's low risk, it's high return. And it's about developing social capital and organisational capability and capacity. So there's just a list of things you can do. Play streets, parking day, you might have been part of in the past. Guerrilla gardening, just pop-up infrastructure is another form of tactical urbanism. Pop-up retail, park mobile, etc. So here's some examples of those sorts of things. Chair bombing, food carts and trucks, park mobile in San Francisco. This notion of micro-mixing down on the right-hand corner, it's from West End, but it's about really small businesses that collaborate and work together. So whether there's a group of people that get together and open a bar, and near that bar is another activity space, and whether there's, you know, there's a range of creatives that come together and sometimes share space because space is not affordable for an individual business operator. And so it is through this collaborative shared approach where you can get activity. And I think there's some opportunities out here in Logan, in the Logan Central. And much like the Glenorchy example, if you can kind of get out of the way and get people to come together and create a space and facilitate people using it, you can generate activity, which of course the city benefits from. Activation, I touched on earlier. I think the Fully Fest program in the skate parks that we did out here years ago was an early example of activation in southeast Queensland. You know, you can create positive interactivity within a space. It's short term, it demonstrates what is possible and brings increasing activity to a space as well. Restaurant Day. I didn't know about this, but I love it. And so on the third Sunday in May, it's a global movement, it's disruption. It's usually celebrating with pop-up restaurants. If you can't do a pop-up restaurant, turn your home into a restaurant. Invite people around to your house, cook for them. You know, invite them into your home, why not? You know, well, there's probably a million reasons why not, but I'll touch on that later. But exactly why not, you know? Make a few bucks, taste some food, have a good time. I love it. The last thing I want to talk about is social impact investment. I'm really excited about this. I'm working on a project at the moment with a company called Big River, which is a startup which will eventually deliver housing for Aboriginal people that's rent to buy and affordable. And the financing and the funding from that is coming from the private sector. So in simplest terms, a super fund that has a balanced portfolio, and because of where people's values lie these days, people want balanced investments. So if one of those investments in a portfolio gives you less return but creates a social good, you feel good about investing in it. You're doing something for people, you're doing something for sustainability, so that's where it kind of comes from. So in its simplest terms, you might get 10% on, you know, straight capitalist project, you might get 4% on this, but, you know, 6% of it is actually feeling good about what you're doing for people as well. So it's just starting up in Australia. We anticipate there's a pipeline of funding in the order of $25 to $50 billion coming down the pipe. We're working on some pilot projects in Queensland at the moment, just to kind of tweak the model and make sure it works well. But in the future, Logan has a heritage of a lot of social housing that's mismatched. You've got individuals in 4-bedroom homes sitting on large lots, so there's an opportunity, I think, through a model like this to untap that and create better, more fit-for-purpose housing. So that's a really exciting innovation. And it doesn't just have to be for infrastructure, it can be for programs, it can be for a range of things. So Yep, that's coming up. And I think it's a huge opportunity for cities, and it's going to change cities. Just some things to reflect on before I end up. I think forgiveness is easier to get than permission, has been my experience in the last 13 to 15 years. We're so obsessed with rules. We're so obsessed with, oh no, you need this permission. Planners, I'm a planner. I'm not going to kick a planner because I'm a planner, I'll be kicking myself. We love to make people get approvals. It's really hard. It stifles innovation. It doesn't create a space where people can go and do their own things. So I think we need to find the right balance there. But absolutely, forgiveness over permission any time. Too many controls stifle natural innovation. You have to empower local communities and change agents to take charge and get outcomes. In terms of being a change agent, I believe it should be taught in universities. I mean, I was taught to be a planner, very silo, as Catherine was talking about before. There's an architect, very silo. To be a change agent, to be someone that can work with communities is something I've had to teach myself to get projects up. But I think the way the world's going, we need more people that are change agents acting on behalf of communities, that have the skill sets, that can access the skill sets if they need them, that are experienced about putting a development together, about project finance, about design, about a whole range of things which are complex that most people don't have individually, but collectively can get a really great outcome. Capacity and good governance are the building blocks of real change from the bottom up as far as I'm concerned. I work with this fantastic Aboriginal corporation in the Gulf country in North Queensland, the Orman people. Hopefully there's some Orman people here today. They're amazing. They have the best governance. They're the best administration. They're incredible. They work incredibly well together. They're high capacity. And people are just throwing funding at them. Absolutely throwing it. And it's because of capacity and good governance. They're low risk. They're a good news story. People want to get involved with them. We just got $500,000 funding from them from a major energy company to support a tourism project. So there's lots of good things happening in that space as well. Social media, I want to talk about that quickly because it worries me in terms of my nieces and nephews a little bit. And I read about it a lot. I'm a bit of a nerd. I find it really, really interesting. So what we know so far is that social media makes kids stay at home for longer. They're going to be there till they're 35. I'm not a parent, but holy hell, you know, for the parents in the room, that's enough. Enough is enough, right? Get out. I mean, sorry? No. Well, I spend a lot of time at home anyway. I have. Anyway. They learn to drive later. They don't need to drive. Why would I drive when I've got mum's four-wheel drive at home? Why would I need to do that? They're isolated. They spend a lot of time in their bedrooms on the phone because that's reality to them. So they don't necessarily have an opportunity or a need to socially connect, which is, you know, where my practice area is. And everyone loves to socially connect. You know, we're humans. We need to be together. Touch, feel, smell, whatever it is we do, you know, publicly. They have increased anxiety and depression. Firsthand, I know it's changing the way that community engagement is done. It's also quite powerful in terms of giving power back to communities because your opinion on social media can make developers do the right thing, can make councils sit up and take notice, can actually change outcomes. And the last point really is the stuff I'm finding most interesting at the moment is those amazing Italian villages or those villages in Japan where people live to be really old, like hyper longevity. The average, you know, age of death is beyond 90. The factors apart from diet and exercise, the one that really stands out is community and connectivity. And not within your own family, it's the everyday incidental interactions of being able to walk out and buy a loaf of bread, get a coffee, have that dog that barks at you, the neighbour you wave at, all that kind of stuff is incredibly important for how long people live. And therefore, I think it's really important in terms of creating a great place. So opportunities for that interactivity are really important as well. So I might just leave it there. Thank you for having me. It's great. I'm really excited about the future of Logan Central. And yeah, cheers.